Does your collection have a purpose, or do you just have a bunch of random snakes? Let's talk about project planning and how to grow your collection on a budget. What's up, everybody? I'm Jim with Straight Blast Pythons, and this is Toffee, our pinstripe Enchi ball python. So the reason I have her out joining us today is because Toffee here, as she tries to run away, was actually our first ball python that we picked up here at Straight Blast. And I point that out because, to be honest with you, I have no idea why we have her. So I don't say that in a mean light. She's a great snake for a Enchi pinstripe. She's got really good coloring. She's got that solid, unbroken stripe down her back. Very clear Enchi in the head. She is a great example of what she is. But going into our second year here, she doesn't really fit into any of our projects. She doesn't have a place in the collection other than just being a nice snake that's filling up one of our tubs. That may sound harsh, but as a new breeder, rack space is typically at a premium, and most people don't have an unlimited budget to just buy a bunch of snakes that they don't have a purpose for. And because of that is why today I want to talk about the importance of actually planning out your projects so that way you can build that collection on whatever limited budget you might have. I'm going to go ahead and put Toffee away. Let's get into it. Alright, so like I said, it is extremely important to actually have a plan. And this video is not being directed at somebody who's just looking to collect. This is actually talking to somebody who has the intention of breeding for a business in the long run. Having a plan is going to let you stay focused on what you actually need to add to your collection, what you're going to purchase, what you're going to hold back, how you're going to expand and grow. A lot of breeders early on fall into the trap of developing what I've heard called as a Noah's Ark collection. And I'm no different from that. You know, in the beginning, I wanted to start out with a 1.3 ratio pieds, clowns, ultramel, xanthic. I wanted to do a little bit of everything, but you quickly come to realize, like I said earlier, rack space is at a premium. You don't have room or the finances typically as a starting breeder to have that many projects. It's important to actually pick what you want to work with and stay focused. So one of the most important things to think about when you're actually planning your collection is, what is your end goal? And that can be a number of different things. How big do you want to get? How many snakes do you want to have? Is there a certain income level that you're trying to achieve? Are you trying to actually have a full-time career out of breeding snakes? Are you looking for a second income or retirement supplement? That all plays a factor into what you're planning. But more importantly, your projects themselves and the projects you pick are going to play a big role. Having that plan is actually going to help you ensure that you're not just purchasing animals to purchase animals. Everything that you add to the collection will further your goal, will further your project. And that's how you're going to truly, truly succeed. If you can't work a project, you're never going to stand out. And as a newer breeder, especially in today's market, you kind of need to have some way to stand out, or you're just going to kind of fall back into the crowd. That's why, 2.5 years now into us breeding here, and I've really kind of zeroed in on where I want to go with the collection. I'm looking back at things and realizing, stuff that I purchased in the first year, Toffee, for example, I really shouldn't have picked up. Not that she's a bad snake, but she, again, doesn't fit the collection. At the same time, some of the holdbacks that I kept from last year, I don't really think I need in the long run, and it's even got me questioning a couple of the pairings that I made. Had I actually had a plan going into it, I might be a year or two ahead of where I actually am now in terms of holdbacks, in terms of project growth. I could actually be shooting to be producing double visuals in the next year or two instead of just starting to make my double hets and triple hets going into this next season. It makes a big difference to carefully plan out where you're going before you start buying a bunch of animals. So, a couple general rules, though, that apply regardless of what your plans are or what your project and goals are, is typically you want to be female heavy, 1-3 or 1-4 ratio is pretty common. And you don't want to buy anything that you can already make. When you're purchasing new animals, if it's something that you can produce in the next season or maybe the season after that, typically you don't want to purchase it unless there's a really good reason of needing one of those genetics that this new snake might have in your collection sooner. Typically, any purchase you make when you're trying to build a collection from a budget standpoint should add something new that your collection doesn't already have. So just like the video talking about the cost breakdown of breeding beyond the snakes, we're going to come up with a scenario here. This can be targeting somebody who's just getting into breeding and really has not developed much of a collection or really hasn't purchased any snakes yet. So we are starting from scratch, building a collection the way I kind of wish I started. Like before, we're going to make a couple assumptions. One, we're going to say that the goal size of this collection is to fill an ARS 5540 rack, which is a pretty standard rack in the industry if you're not super familiar with it. It's very similar to this rack that I have right behind me, only twice the size. It's a 5520. Also, we're going to say that this collection is going to focus on 2 different projects. I know I kind of earlier said, identify the project you want to work, but in the industry, you want to have some variation. I wouldn't put all of my eggs into one basket, but I wouldn't go again into that Noah's Ark collection like I was talking about earlier. So we're going to identify 2 different projects to work, and both of those projects are going to be able to fit in that ARS 5540 rack. So in the end, at the end of this video, we should be thinking 40 snakes in total with a 1-to-3 or a 1-to-4 male-female ratio. In this aspect, I think 1-to-3 works best given just the general layout of an ARS 5540, or at least that's how I tend to lay it out in my spreadsheets, 1 male to 3 females. And the income goals don't really matter for this, but we're going to say that this is somebody who's looking to have a second income or maybe supplement retirement in the future. This is not somebody who's going to try to breed as a career. All right, so starting out, we need to identify the projects we're going to work with, and that's going to be up to you. Pick what you like. If you take nothing else from this, grow the collection you like, pick the projects you like. If you don't enjoy looking at the animals, if you don't enjoy working with these animals, it's going to become a chore. You're not going to take care of them the same way if it was an animal that you loved seeing every time you open that tub. Because guess what? You're going to be doing a lot. You're going to be doing a lot of cleaning poop, a lot of changing substrate, a lot of watering. Don't keep stuff that you don't actually enjoy working with or enjoy the project that you're into. For example, with this, with us reworking our collection here, I've identified 2 projects that I want to work here at Straight Blast Pythons. And originally we were looking at the clown and the genetic stripe, but I want to be a little bit more ambitious than that and start working towards an ultimate goal of a quad recessive that, probably going to take 10, 15 years to produce, maybe even longer. And this is the point of project planning. It is to zero in on where you want to take your collection. So like here, we've identified the Xanthic Clown project and the Hypogenetic Stripe project. The 2 of those will let us eventually work towards the True Ghost G-Stripe Clown. This is the type of stuff that you need to think about. Is every single animal in your collection going to be a visual or a double visual? No, you're going to have a lot of hets. You're going to have a lot of maybe visual with a het, but it's ultimately all focused towards the same spot. We want to pick our females first, and we're going to start literally from nothing. We're going to assume this person has 0 snakes, and we're going to start out 6 females right off the bat, 3 for each project. Now, whether you want to look at this as somebody who's purchasing these females as babies and taking the first 2 years to grow them up, or if these are people who have just gone out and purchased a whole bunch of adults, that's fine. It's kind of irrelevant for this. We're just going to assume we're starting out with 3 females, 3 in each project. So I'm going to simplify this. We're going to say, hey, this person's ultimately going for a clown pied project. They're going to have 3 het clown females and 3 het pied females. So why do I say hets versus visuals if we're going for this project? Honestly, if you can afford it, get visuals. That's fine. But again, we're talking budget planning. But these females should be a mix of genetics, and you should try to avoid any sort of overlap. So let's say, a pastel het clown, a lesser het clown, and a, pinstripe het clown, okay? And then you go to the pieds, and you get an orange dream het pied, a yellow belly het pied, and, leopard het pied. What they are don't really matter. It's just the concept here. And if you can get, some hets that have multiple genes in there, even better. When you're ready to breed, whether it's in that first year if you bought adults or 2 to 3 years later if you bought babies, and you get your males, make sure your males are visual if the females were hets. If you bought all visual females, a het male works. Now, in my opinion, it makes more sense to buy the het females because you're going to get them cheaper. Hets are cheaper than visuals, and females are more expensive than males. You're going to save more money getting 3 het females than you would for getting that 1 het male. Having that Het on one side and visual on the other side when talking about the male to female equation is critical because that's how you're going to ensure that you're going to get visuals to hold back in the long run. Het to het pairings, well, typically, statistically, you should get some. You're going to get a lot less visuals and you're going to get a lot of possible hets. So I highly advise, if you're trying to stay on a budget, avoiding going the het to het route, at least in the beginning. So, all right, we've had our first seasons, we've made our pairings, visual males to het females, you've had your clutches. At this rate, you should have a pretty even 50-50 split of visual hatchlings and 100% het hatchlings. The goal here is now to hold back any of your visual females, as well as any hets that might be a combination that you didn't achieve in the visuals. The visuals are what's important, but those hets are going to allow you to make combinations that you would have otherwise not had available if you were to just get rid of them all. At this point, you do not want to hold back any males. Just sell your males. Don't worry about keeping them back. You'll wind up purchasing more males to add genes and expand the bloodlines later. Grow by keeping your females. All right, so year 2, what now? You've held back those females from your first year, but you don't have anything new to actually pair with your males to make different combinations. But you do. Again, this is part of the importance of having 2 different projects. And ideally, you've picked 2 projects that overlap in some way or they complement each other in some way. Again, going back to our example, the clown pied. So going into your second season, you simply swap males. So now you're pairing your visual clown to your 3 het pied females and your visual pied to your 3 het clown females. You're not going to get any visuals this year, but everything you get is going to be guaranteed het for whatever your visual was. You're going to be getting new combinations of genetics in with that. You'll be holding back those hets to further that project. And you have the possibility of passing on the het from the other project. So now you're starting to work towards your double hets. You're expanding the project in multiple different ways without adding any new females to the mix. Now, with genetic testing starting to come around and expand in what you can test for, you can actually utilize that to pick your holdbacks a little bit. But again, your goal is to hold back females. Hold back combinations that are going to further your project along. At this point, you're probably not looking at single genes of whatever was in the male side because you probably have that from the prior year. Start looking at holding back genetic combinations from the females from the opposite project. Again, this is going to let you grow both projects as well as start moving into a double recessive in the long run. The other thing you should be thinking about at the start of year 2, really before you've even started pairing, is purchases. So this is the point where you need to start thinking about adding to your collection, and you need to think about adding males very specifically. The typical lifespan, and I don't mean lifespan as in like they're going to die off, but I mean lifespan as in terms of their usefulness as a breeder at this point in time in a collection is really only going to be 1 to 2 years for a male. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. If you had an Orange Dream pied male, for example, you might want to hold on to him because Super OD pieds are actually pretty well sought after and is a great project in and of itself. But as a general rule, 1 to 2 years is the way to go. If you do have, males that you want to breed again to work on making those supers in the future, hang on to them. But if not, I highly recommend clearing up the rack space, rotating them out, getting new males prepped and ready to go. So at the end of your second breeding season, when you're done with your pairings, you can sell those males off, open those rack space back up for future holdbacks, and you can have 2 new males ready to go for the 3rd year. So now going into year 3, you have 2 options. Either you can go back to pairing your visual clown to your het clowns and your visual pied to your het pieds, or you can cross them again, depending on which project you want to push harder. If at this point in time you're thinking, okay, those single visual projects are where I want to go, pair visual to the equivalent het. If you're more focused on that long-term double recessive project, pair visual to the opposing hets. Either way, you're going to grow your collection. Whether you are shooting to hold back visuals or you're shooting to hold back possible double hets, you're going to grow. Whatever you choose to do in year 3, do the opposite year 4. You're basically repeating the cycle from years 1 and 2. At this point, 4 years in, you've probably got enough holdbacks to fill or almost fill that ARS 5540. Also by year 3, year 4, those visuals that you produced in year 1 should be going into your breeding rotation by now, allowing you to actually make guaranteed double hets or give you more options for combinations. So by this point, you can grow your collection to about 40 snakes off of an initial purchase of only 8 with 2 additional later. So For the purchase of 10 snakes, you can have 40 in about 4 or 5 years if you hold back aggressively. Now, obviously, you don't have to grow that fast, you don't have to hold that many back, but this is just an example of somebody who's actually trying to quickly ramp up and grow to breed. And once again, after year 4, you're back to that decision of what you want to do with your males. Honestly, at this point in time, you should still be adding new males. The idea is you should constantly be adding new males into the collection to replace the old males. That's how you're going to get the new genetics in. And at this point, by year 4, when you start having your visuals that you've produced early on ready to go, you can save a little bit of money by looking at het males. And that way you can still keep that 50-50 odds of making the visuals while saving a little bit. If you want to spend the money on the visual and have that guaranteed whole group of visuals, that's awesome too. I'm just talking on a budget. That's how you can save a couple bucks. But once again, the key to this all is growth of the number of females. So you're holding back the females. And now by year 4, you're probably pushing the rack space of that ARS 5540, especially seeing as you're at the point where you have more females than those 2 males you've been working with. Or maybe if you kept them, the 4 males that you have can really reliably start breeding. You might not be as quick to dump the males in your 4th year as you did early on if you're concerned about rack space to replace them, because you might need them. You're likely going to be having enough girls that you're going to exceed that 1-to-3 or 1-to-4 ratio. And now, yes, the number of males is going to start to matter, but your females are the most critical part of this growth. You should not consider replacing your females until you are completely out of rack space. And at that point in time, replace any non-hets you might have in case you started out in the beginning with something that wasn't a het and you were making visuals. That's an option too, and not a bad one if you want to get a really gene-packed girl for a decent price. But we didn't really talk about that option with this example. At this point, if you were out of rack space, I would get rid of the hets, specifically the single gene hets first, followed by multi-gene hets. Then when you start getting into your visuals, only start getting rid of your visuals when you have upgraded replacements for them. Obviously, the goal here would be to be having all of your females be visual combinations of your 2 projects, so visual clowns or visual pieds, or guaranteed 100% double het females working towards that double recessive project. So I know this is probably one of the longer videos that I've made. I've been rambling quite a bit. I'm just trying to help you get an idea of how to start thinking when you're looking at what snakes you want to buy and how you want to grow as far as a business or as far as just your collection in general when looking at breeding. It doesn't have to be a business. You could just be doing this as a hobby and want to further a project. Either way, the structuring of how to grow on a budget remains pretty similar. Not everybody has 20-30 grand to turn around and dump on some high-end snakes. Most of us are just building from the ground up, and this is a way that you can get into it for a low cost of entry and still develop a pretty respectable collection in a short period of time. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up here. Hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully I was able to help you in some way. If you disagree with everything I said, let me know. If you agree, let me know. Lets me know whether I should be keeping doing content like this and move on to something else. Staring at these lights is starting to really hurt my eyes, so I'm going to end it here. I'll see you next time.